Sim Fubara, who is a member of the APC and not any other person. And it was very clear that Nyesom Wike is not a member of the APC. That as far as they know, he belongs to the PDP. And that Sim Fubara is entitled to a second term as long as he wins at the primaries. And that every governor, sitting governor within their party will have to go through that primaries. And there seems to be support coming from the top, from the spokesperson of the party and from the chairman of the party for Fubara. And that, I think, is a strong message to those who go about that Fubara is not 001 of River State, is 001 of his ward. It is also a statement to them that in spite of their exertions, exuberant, youthful exertions, that they are being reminded that there is a limit to their enthusiasm. The people concerned know themselves. This is a very strong message from the APC party itself, and those who are intelligent enough should be able to understand the subtext of that intervention by the party on the side of Sim Fubara.
All right, let me start with the tax law and the controversies or the conversation around that. I thought that interview was very detailed with Dr. Zaka Dideji, and for avoidance of doubt, it would be good for you to watch that. I believe it's on our Arise News YouTube channel. It was aired yesterday on This Day Live with Dr. Abati, and you can watch the replay of that. However, in all of our sayings, I must say that this morning, I doubt that a number of people are convinced with some of the things that have been said. And I think it further describes the erosion of the trust of the people and the government. And the question has been asked around when this happens, or when we have a crisis of legitimacy in such an instance, it erodes the level of work that has been done on this joint tax bill. I say this because months of consultations were had, and Dr. Adedeji spoke about that. Mr. Taiwo Yedele has been here a number of times to talk about how widely they consulted with various stakeholders. There were a number of debates going back to rejig the law in order to ensure that all parties had a fair representation, especially when the northern region had, were not happy with the tax the VAT distribution. Those issues were tackled, and finally seemed like we had gotten to a point where we were able to have a proper tax law that to some extent or to a large extent would work for the average Nigerian person. Following the accusations or the allegations made by Honorable Dasuki in the House of Representatives, then resurrected a new chain of challenges. Now, a few people have come out to speak. I remember that when Mr. Oyedele came here to the studio, he was unable to really speak authoritatively, because he himself had said he had not seen the harmonized copy of the bill as passed or as transmitted by the National Assembly. And that was, of course, cause for concern, even though he said he had seen a copy or he had known what was happening, but what he had was the unofficial document. Now, Dr. Dedeji has now confidently come out to say that it is what was passed, is what it was gazetted, and that's what would be implemented. There are still conversations around this. Then, if Honorable Dasuki raised that alarm in the National Assembly and it seemed or deemed to be false, then he also needs to come on the question, and I'm sure you'd agree. If he was able, because he who alleges must prove, if he has said it and he threw the whole nation, upended a tax law that had gained momentum, then he has questions to answer. Perhaps he needs to come out and share some of the, the evidence he has to throw Nigerians into this panic as to whether or not there was a tweaking or an adjustment of what was passed. I believe that in the spirit of fairness, both parties have spoken, but he who alleges must prove, just because of what it portends for building that trust between the people and the government, and the fact that when it comes to tax matters, it can be very sensitive. You're talking about people's hard-earned money. There are still gray areas around that, and so that still exists. Now, what the taxman must do, or what the government must do, already they've already started that. One of it was this engagement by Dr. Zaka Dideji. He hasn't spoken a lot around this. Mr. Oyedele has led the charge many times, and you can understand why he was the chairman of the committee. But I believe that a lot more information, as we have called consistently for, has to go out. And People need to find information from the right sources, not from social media banter, not from social media propagandists, but people who have the correct information around this. And in order for us to do that, Nigerians need to see certified true copies or true actual documents, not reported speech. I think that's very important. People must understand. Then how the tax affects them. There's still a lot of conversations or opaqueness or shall I say uncertainties for a number of the everyday Nigerians as to how this tax affects them because again of the misinformation that happened in the timeline in between. I believe that the tax office, Nigerian Revenue Service, should take the lead on this by ensuring that information is put out there consistently and in different formats that everybody, different people can understand. Different languages that appeals to different cultures, that appeals to different sensibilities. This is the onus of the Nigerian government to ensure that everyone is carried along and in a way, especially because it affects every single person. And so those are some of the things I would mention this morning because it still hangs in the air. It's a good thing that the Dr. Adedeji spoke, spoke authoritatively. He was very confident in his responses yesterday in that interview. But I do feel that Honorable Dasuki owes the Nigerian people after making such a grave allegation to justify what he said, so that we know that what we have on ground years down the line, we're not questioning or nothing else comes up out of that. Beyond that, one other thing where they say, oh, he's protecting the poor, and evidence of the fact that people don't see it that way is that NANS is still going on. They've called for a strike action on the 14th of January next week, to protest the fact that the tax law does not benefit the most vulnerable. That needs to be addressed as well. Why are there uncertainties around and people are jittery about its effect and impact on their livelihood? This needs to be addressed and in very clear terms. Engagements, because you don't need that kind of distraction, particularly when the president has said it's a monumental shift and could be pave way for Nigeria to generate revenue and to protect the most vulnerable in society. Now, moving on away from that, let me touch on insecurity. The president has talked tough, even though, like I mentioned earlier on, he's talking tough from abroad. And a number of people right from the time had criticized or at least had something to say about the fact that at such a critical time in our nation, he's not in the country. Like I mentioned earlier, he's entitled to go on leave. Every worker deserves a break. But at a point in time where there are a number of issues around insecurity, perhaps some people might argue that this is a time to be at home, to stay at home and actually, as the commander-in-chief, really take charge of what's going on. We saw what's happened now in Niger State, and unfortunately, we've heard and read statements like this from commanders-in-chief, not just President Tinubu, but even previous leaders. But what Nigerians want to move away from is announcements and the right language to the right actions, that we will see an end to brazen acts of terrorism like this, where a large number of people would be carted away. This is what Nigerians are asking, and they're saying it's not rocket science. Straight after that, we took the story of Katsina State, and I must give kudos to security operatives who are working assiduously to ensure that they're able to defeat terrorism. But unfortunately, for it to have lasted this long, the Nigerian people are saying it's not enough, and people do not feel safe currently under this administration. And that's one area that must be faced even as we look ahead to the next elections in 2027. I already talked about the politicking in Rivers State and in other parts of the country. Politics is ahead on